I started sleepwalking when I was 9. The beginning of my episodes correlated with a pretty nasty spill off the back of Dad's dirt bike. I wasn't wearing a helmet. I stayed unconscious for a while and had to be rushed to the hospital. They sent me home with 16 stitches up the back of my scalp. My hair looks patchy back there to this day. Mom took me away shortly after that. I don't think the dirt bike accident was solely to blame, but it held some responsibility for her decision to leave. I don't remember Mom and Dad ever being happy together, but it still hurt to think of us never being a family again. Mom and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment she could barely afford until she sued Dad for alimony. That apartment was where I started sleepwalking. Every few nights, Mom would wake to the sound of my head repeatedly knocking against my bedroom door. When she opened the door, I'd walk across the apartment with my eyes half closed until I reached the front door. My hand would slide pathetically off the locked door handle, and each time it fell to my side, I would butt my head against the door as if expecting it to be open. If I tried it again, Mom would have to wake me up. Most times, she said I gave up and went back to bed after my first attempt to leave. If Mom didn't let me out of my room, say if she took too much melatonin or had too much to drink, I would keep hitting my head against my bedroom door until I woke myself up. I never remembered getting out of bed and could never explain why I would hit my head against the door. I gave myself some pretty nasty bruises those nights Mom didn't let me out. One night, I guess Mom felt curious. When I stopped at the apartment door, she opened it for me. I don't remember any of this, so I'm retelling what she told to me. I stepped into the dim, red light of the hallway. Mom's apartment wasn't in a nice building, mind you. The hallway light nearest to our apartment had burned out weeks before, so the only light came from the glowing red exit signs at either end of the hallway. The door at the left end led to the stairs, and the door at the right led to more apartments. I went left. Mom followed me and opened the door for me as moths danced over our heads. The door led out in a stairwell also lit only by the red exits above and below us. Mom said she almost turned me back around because she was scared to let me walk down the dark stairs. But I wasn't seeing with my eyes. When Mom saw how easily I descended the first couple of stairs, she followed me the rest of the way down. I walked through the parking lot and into the street. A greasy man who'd smoked away his teeth sat under one of the light poles. He warned Mom not to wake me. She later laughed when recounting the grave concern he showed. In the moment, she was just glad he didn't try to follow us or ask for anything. His face embedded itself in my mind even though I did not consciously see it. He had dark, sad eyes ringed with scars from sores and rashes. He'd allowed his hair and beard to grow thick, perhaps to help mask the raised scars. Mom followed me across the street to the courtyard on the other side. It belonged to an HOA that decorated it with artwork and hedges but left it otherwise vacant. A cement path wound through it without any benches on which to sit and enjoy the metalworks and sculptures. There was plenty of room for a playground, but not even a solitary swing hung in the courtyard. It was nothing but a place for passing through, full of distractions posing as meaningful things. I followed the cement path, still completely unaware. Mom followed me past an iron rabbit head with serious, slanted eyes. The space behind those eyes was darker than the night around us. We passed a man made of tubes and wrenches sitting atop a wagon wheel bicycle who was tall enough to see over the hedges with his eyes made of giant machine nuts. A faceless wooden family, all in different poses, came next. Sometimes my friends and I would stop our bikes in front of this display and ask each other were the man, woman, and child laughing, dancing? My friend Piper once joked that they looked like they were showering, the man washing his hair, the woman rinsing her back, the child washing their face. Mom said I stopped in the very center of the courtyard where it was completely empty, save for the path cutting through the open grass. She said I stood in the middle and looked up at the stars, of which she could see very few. Apparently, I was transfixed. That part I remember faintly, with one altered detail. I could see billions of lights in the sky. Staring up at the multitude left me with a feeling that stuck in my chest after I awoke. I still remember that distinct feeling of blissful meaninglessness. Each of those beautiful dots represented an eternal explosion with the power to crush me 1,000,000 times over in a fraction of a blink of an eye. Yet I got to stand on soft grass on a cool night and gaze upon that power in wonder. What a privilege. What an honor. That's how I woke up every time, staring up at the sky. It would become dark and empty, like the sky my mother saw whenever consciousness returned to me. I would rub my eyes and ask Mom, "Did I do it again?" She would say yes and lead me back to her apartment. The toothless man on the curb would always be sleeping under the light, and I would try not to stare at the scarring around his eyes. I lost count of how many times I sleepwalked out of Mom's apartment, and she never explained why she kept allowing me to. Sometimes I wonder if she wanted to try to understand what I kept doing out there in the courtyard. Maybe she felt a trace of some of the feelings I felt out there. Dad never spent much time with me when he had me. I went there every other weekend. I'd mostly watch TV and read comics, but I started looking forward to going to Dad's because I would sleep normally in my old room at his house. I'd always feel so much better and leave feeling refreshed. I'm sure deep down Mom was glad her son was getting some rest, but to me she always seemed angry about it. In hindsight, I think she resented the fact that Dad's was my place of respite, despite his lackadaisical parenting. Mom always said we wouldn't have to stay in her apartment forever. A few times a year, usually just before spring, she would start bringing home binders of rental listings she printed off at work. Sometimes she'd even bring home real estate listings. But every year, I'd find the listings in the trash one morning. Those days, Mom usually slept in and took long showers. My sleepwalking persisted into my teens. A few times each month, Mom woke up to me hitting my head against my bedroom door until she let me out. Once, she took me to a checkup with a general practitioner covered by her insurance. He referred me to a sleep specialist, but Mom looked into what it would cost to get me a sleep study and told me maybe we can do it if my next job has better benefits. Shortly after that conversation, I woke up in the middle of the night to find her sobbing at our table with another binder spread out in front of her. In addition to better living spaces, this one included a few jobs as well. Most of the pages were balled up on the floor around her. She pretended not to notice me, and I pretended I hadn't seen anything. I backed into my room and closed the door. She never talked about moving again, and she never left her job. When I was 14, my friend Piper told our friend group she could lucid dream. I asked what that meant, and she told me she could control her dreams from the inside. In the dream world, she could be whatever she wanted to be. She said her dreams all looked like they took place in Toy Story. Her room even had sky blue wallpaper patterned with white clouds like Andy's. I said, if you can control the dream, why not change it to something else? And she said the people in Toy Story just seemed to live simpler lives than the ones she'd grown up with. In her dreams, she would meet us all at Pizza Planet, and no one ever looked at their phone. Everyone wanted to know if she could fly in her dreams, and Piper laughed. She said, "How do you think I always get to Pizza Planet?" She raised a fist and said, "To infinity and beyond, bro." I found a book about lucid dreaming at the library and started reading it on the bus ride home. I was disappointed to learn it could take weeks, months, or even years to achieve consciousness in dreams. Following the book's instructions, I started a dream journal, which is how I learned how frequently the sculptures across the street appeared in my dreams. They would often manifest as peripheral details I only noticed during recall. I'd remember the rabbit head staring down at me from a rooftop, or the bicycle man riding across my view in the distance. The wooden family appeared most often of all. In one dream, I approached them because I thought I heard the child make a noise. As I drew close, I realized they were all making sound. They were all sobbing. From then on, if I saw the wooden family, I always woke up. I started adding drawings to my dream journal. I found I enjoyed sketching far more than writing, so I would draw what I saw, then use words to describe anything I could not communicate through visuals. I found there was very little I couldn't express through my drawings, though. I'll never forget the first time I achieved lucidity. In the middle of a dream in which I was making breakfast, I happened to glance at the microwave and see the time 87:66 displayed. Recognizing this flaw in reality, I became aware of the dream. I woke up a second after realizing I'd become conscious, as I read is often the case with first-time lucid dreamers, but at least I knew lucid dreaming was possible for me to achieve. I started going to bed earlier to try to give myself more opportunity to dream. A few times, I became lucid for a handful of seconds before waking. Slowly, over weeks, I got better at holding on to my dreams. I didn't dare try manipulating anything or making any choices, but I could observe the dream in a fully conscious state. I'm sure my awareness altered the dreams because they were all extraordinarily mundane. All the spontaneity and weirdness had been sucked out of them. Most often, I would dream about talking to my friends at school or to my parents. Sometimes I would be with Mom in her car driving along a familiar stretch of highway. I remember noticing things in those dreams that didn't look real for the first time, like a semi-truck with wheels lining the entire length of its trailer, or a motorcycle with a narrowed front end of a Volkswagen Beetle instead of a typical fender. Most of the cars had features missing or added to them if I paid close enough attention. That's how I knew something was different about the first time I became lucid during a dream taking place in my bedroom. I gained consciousness standing next to my bed, staring at my closed door. It was nighttime. I could barely see, and the apartment was dead silent. Something stirred in the corner. I turned toward it and saw the shadow of a person sitting on the floor. When they realized I'd noticed them, they stood. I couldn't see any of their features or much of their shape. Their skin looked too dark to be Mom's, though. They walked toward the wall and vanished through it. I reached to open the door and follow the dark figure. The texture of the doorknob surprised me. It felt so tactile and cold. I felt every vibration as I turned it and opened the door. Its familiar squeal momentarily broke the apartment's still silence. The dream remained stable as I left my bedroom and entered the living area. I walked past the dark kitchen, searching for the mysterious figure. I heard a gentle knock on the front door. The knock wasn't intrusive or demanding, but it was still the middle of the night, and even though I was dreaming, the sound of someone knocking at the door filled me with apprehension. My subconscious began to tug at my body. It wanted to open the door. It possessed a separate will. I pulled back weakly, and it became apparent who was in whose world. I peered through the peephole and saw the red-lit hallway and the figure from my room standing patiently against the opposite wall. I could not make out their face, but their head rose higher than the door next to them. I didn't know anyone that height. I don't think I'd ever seen somebody so tall. I became an observer as my hand twisted the deadbolt, then grabbed the doorknob. I glanced toward Mom's bedroom and saw her door was closed. When I turned back around, the apartment door had already opened. The tall figure standing in the shadows across from me nodded once, turned, and stepped in the direction of the stairwell. The dim red light from the exit silhouetted them. They were either naked or wearing skin-tight clothes. They had the frame of a praying mantis with long, bony hands instead of claws. They passed through the stairwell door without opening it. I tried to do the same but bumped flat against the metal door. Something warm tickled the hairs above my upper lip. The metallic scent that filled my nose told me it was blood. I stepped back and tried opening the door. It groaned like an old man being pulled from sleep as it opened. The tall figure had already descended past the first flight and looked at me through the balusters. The center of its face contained a pattern of black dots I took for eyes. There were close to 10 of them in a circle pattern. I have tried drawing its face from memory but can never be sure the image I recall is accurate. Sometimes I remember more or less eyes. Sometimes I remember the slit of a mouth near the bottom of its egg-shaped head. But other times I recall no mouth at all. As much as the image of that thing staring at me through the balusters is scarred into my mind, it's unfocused and fluid. I followed the figure down the stairs. It was already standing outside, patiently waiting by the time I reached the glass exterior door on the ground level. I didn't fight this time when compelled to open the door and step into the cool night. Layers of stars I'd never consciously seen textured the sky above while we walked toward the street. Against the streetlight lay the toothless man. He appeared to be asleep. His eyes were closed and his mouth hung open, moving slightly with the rise and fall of his chest. The tall figure faded as it approached the toothless man. By the time it reached him, it fully vanished. The toothless man startled awake with a soft shout. His bleary eyes met mine and he rasped, "You're awake," which I understood as, "You're awake." I asked, "Who are you?" He raised his eyes and hands to the starry sky and said, "Enter the light." Enter the light. Then he lowered one hand and pointed toward the courtyard. I looked and saw the tall figure walking into it. When I looked back at the toothless man, he was limp and snoring again. The iron rabbit watched me enter the courtyard. Its slanted, hollow eyes seemed to follow me as I passed. I felt their gaze on my back. The figure was almost as tall as the bicycle man. He, too, seemed to stare down at us as we walked past. When we approached the wooden family, they appeared to be shrieking and clutching themselves in horror. Their posture, though not any different than the dozens of other times I'd looked at them, gripped me with enough apprehension to give even my subconscious pause. I stopped walking before I stepped in front of them. The figure stopped too. It stood perfectly still. "Let's go back," I said to my subconscious. "We have to follow them." I said, "No, we can do whatever we want." "We have to see where they go." I said, "No, we don't. We can go back home." "That's not our home." The figure's long fingers twitched and it started to turn toward me. I shushed the argument in my head and hurried past the wooden family, fearing them far less than the figure I was compelled to follow. When we reached the open center of the courtyard where those layers of stars glowed the brightest, the figure began to glow too. Its dark frame turned white and, in a flash, became a column of brilliant light shooting into infinity above. My body and brain developed an instant and insatiable addiction to the column of light. Its energy merely crackled like a candle despite the column's magnitudinal size, and it radiated a warmth I felt both inside and out. From somewhere behind me, I heard my mother calling my name, but I paid her voice no mind. I took a step toward the light. As its warmth continuously grew within me, it never got hot. It activated senses science has not yet discovered. I perceived stimuli beyond the constraints of matter and human familiarity. I took another step toward the light. My mother called for me again, much nearer this time. I broke into a run. I needed to know what awaited me in the light. As my fingers reached for the column, they touched something soft and warm to my tangible senses. I collided with the soft object and stumbled back. The column disappeared. Where it had been, my terrified mother now stood, tightening the belt of her robe. Her expression held anger, but I also read fear in her eyes as she said, Why did you run away from me?" I relinquished control of the dream to my subconscious and stepped back into the role of an observer. But my subconscious didn't reply to her. Mom snatched my wrist and tried to pull me back toward the apartment, but I wouldn't move. Mom shouted, "Ian!" and her sharp tone awakened me to the truth. I was already awake. I'd slipped out of the dream the moment we collided. I realized I'd become lucid during one of my sleepwalking episodes. It wasn't until that moment that I realized I'd left the apartment in my underwear and bare feet. Only then did I realize how cold it was and shiver. Mom communicated her frustration through her grip as she led me back to the apartment. I pleaded with her not to be mad. I kept telling her I didn't know the dream was real. As we passed the toothless man, I saw he'd woken up again, probably thanks to us. I met his eyes for a moment, and he winced. He offered a pursed-lip smile of condolence before shutting his eyes and lowering his head. Mom pulled me up the red stairs, down the red hallway, and through the open door of her apartment. She made me go straight to bed, but after lying there for a few minutes, I decided I had to risk getting up to use the bathroom. I found Mom tossing her sheets over the couch. Her pillow was already propped against one of the armrests. I asked why she was sleeping on the couch, and she told me, "Because I can't go buy a lock for your door until tomorrow." She went out and bought a lock the next day, one that locked from the outside, so each night when I went to sleep she could lock me in my room. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure she could have gotten in trouble from the building owner and maybe even the police for doing that, but it kept me from sleepwalking out to the courtyard again. That was not the last time I became lucid during a sleepwalking episode, but it was the last time I got out of the apartment. I'd usually wake up as soon as I would try to open the door and find it locked. I tried to give up lucid dreaming, but I found it impossible. Once you learn to recognize when you're dreaming, it becomes hard to unlearn it. It's like forgetting how to ride a bike. About a year after what I called my first sleepwaking incident, I found Mom sitting on my bed when I came home from school. Her cheeks were red and plastered with stray hairs. She told me Dad crashed his dirt bike, the same one I fell off when I hit my head as a kid. But unlike me, he never woke up. She said, "I always told him he was asking for something horrible to happen. That was even before he crashed it with you. You think he thought about breaking his neck when he got on that thing for the last time? This is why I didn't want you around him. Don't ever think you're invincible like he did, Ian. Don't be so stupid." She went on like that until I exploded at her, screaming at her to stop and get out of my room. I wanted her gone so I could cry in peace. But after she was gone, I didn't want to cry anymore. I called Dad just to see if he'd answer his phone. Nothing felt real. I looked at the clock. 3:51. I pinched the back of my hand between fingernails that needed to be trimmed, but the pain changed nothing. My grandma answered Dad's phone and growled, "Hasn't someone told you, Ian? Why are you calling him?" I could tell she'd been crying. I didn't say anything. I just hung up. I never forgave Mom for all those things she said after Dad died. I think the universe settled the score, though. My oh-so-safe and sensible mother got run off the highway by a merging semi-truck that didn't see her little Hyundai accent. I was in the car, too. The truck was driving 10 miles below the speed limit when she tried to pass it. Apparently, another car in front of the semi was responsible for its dragging speed. In a fit of frustration, the truck driver swung his rig into the left lane at his first opportunity to pass, which happened to be the same moment my mom tried to pass him. I'm not sure he knows what he did to us to this day. Mom swerved and rolled us down a small hill into the barricade. Her car flipped over its nose and landed upside down on the other side. I don't remember the impact, the trip to the hospital, or my second emergency surgery. My first memory after careening toward the barricade is of a police officer asking the doctor if I was really awake. The doctor said yes, and the police officer told me Mom had died on impact. She broke her neck, just like Dad. He told me a witness gave police a description of the truck and they were doing everything they could to locate the driver. I didn't care. What difference would it make? I would never get to find out. As a 17-year-old orphan, I had to go live with my grandma. We hadn't talked since she picked up Dad's phone, but she was my only living relative in the state. She lived in a trailer about the same size as Mom's apartment. I didn't tell her about my sleepwaking issue. I didn't want her putting a lock on my bedroom like Mom. I predicted she might use it more than just at night if she felt like it. During fifth period of my first day at my new school, my history teacher started babbling about the parallels between the movie Cars and Buddhist philosophy. I tried to keep up, but he kept switching topics. A few sentences in, he mentioned Buzz Lightyear, and suddenly he was talking about Toy Story instead. The room started to spin as I tried to figure out how any of what he was saying connected to our lesson about the Panama Canal. Somebody shoved my shoulder, and I turned to look at them. It was Piper from 9th grade, who I thought still went to my old school. She still looked like a freshman. She opened her mouth to speak, but the history teacher's stern voice came out of her instead. "Head up, Ian. We don't sleep on our desks here." I opened my eyes and winced when my left eye touched the scratchy fabric of my hoodie. I kept my eyes half shut against the bright lights as I raised my head. I looked at the clock. My head ached like I'd been torn from deep sleep, but that wasn't possible. I'd only been in class for a total of 7 minutes, and I knew I'd been awake for at least the first 5. I apologized, and the teacher kept talking about the Panama Canal, making no mentions of Pixar movies. I raised my hand. Annoyed, he called on me. "I think I need to see the nurse," I said. The throbbing in my head wasn't subsiding. "Why?" he asked. Lowering my head away from the light, I said, "I don't know." "Excuse me?" scoffed the teacher. I said, "I'm not sure, just my head doesn't feel right." The teacher sighed and asked if I knew where to find the nurse's office. I did not, so he sent another student along to show me the way. I don't remember who it was. I could hardly open my eyes and couldn't bear to speak. Without any idea how far away the nurse was, the walk felt like an eternity. I fell asleep again in the nurse's office, and Grandma had to come take me to the hospital. The doctors guessed the car accident that killed Mom knocked something loose in my brain. One suggested a sleep study, but for the second time in my life, my caretaker didn't have health insurance that would cover the exorbitant cost, even though I'd been referred by a doctor. Instead, the doctor tentatively diagnosed me with narcolepsy and prescribed modafinil to help me stay awake during school. Narcolepsy comes in multiple forms. For me, it meant falling asleep instantly and at random, such as what happened during fifth period. 1 second I'd be fully awake and conscious, and the next I'd be fast asleep, snoring even. Even with the modafinil, my narcolepsy made it unsafe for me to drive, which caused me to stay home most of the time. The medication got me through school most days with a few embarrassing exceptions, so I didn't want to stop taking it, but the anxiety it caused made me use it sparingly. I only took it before school. On weekends and holidays, I frequently passed out. Grandma tried to make me take the medication every day, but I needed a break from the tight chest and uncontrollable racing thoughts it gave me. To convince me, Grandma recorded a video of me once during a narcolepsy attack. It started with me slumped over the arm of her couch with a bag of corn chips in my lap. My shoulders jerked, then I straightened. My eyes opened, bleary and unfocused, locked in the forward position. I turned my head toward Grandma, but I seemed to be staring past her. In the video, you can hear her say, "Ian, you're asleep. Ian, wake up." I slowly stand and the corn chips fall next to my feet. Grandma says, "Wake up, Ian. Why won't you just take those damn pills? Why do you gotta make me put up with this?" Still looking toward her but not at her, I say, "I have to dream to feel the light." Grandma says, "Come on now, Ian, wake up." I point at the door and reply, "No, look, it's waiting for me out there. It found me again." Grandma opens the front door and steps onto her small deck. She keeps recording as she spins in a full circle to show me there's nobody outside. Then she says, "See? Nobody here." Suddenly, I run past her and down the deck stairs. Grandma shouts after me and the video ends. After showing me, she asked, "Don't you see what you're like when you're off that medicine? You're liable to get hit by a car or drown in the lake." I assured her neither of those things would happen, but couldn't explain how I knew. I kept the truth secret. I didn't tell her I vividly remembered the episode she recorded, or what I saw standing outside beckoning to me through the window in the door. It had 10 black eyes and the frame of a praying mantis, and it wanted me to follow it. Grandma didn't get fancy with any locks. She tied a string of Corona bottles to my doorknob so if I opened it at night, the noise would wake her up. Sometimes it woke me up too. If it didn't, her cold, dry hand across my face did. Piper started a death metal trio around that time. She asked if I'd draw the artwork for their first EP. I jokingly told her I'd do it if she could pay enough to get me out of my grandma's trailer. My sleepwaking worsened our already strained relationship, but I couldn't afford to leave even though I'd aged out of her guardianship. Piper didn't laugh. She pinched her chin and turned half away from me. Then she said, "How about a free month at my apartment? Take the time to find yourself a job and get your own place." I shrugged and shook my head. I told her a month wouldn't be nearly enough to find a job that would pay enough to cover the security deposit and first month's rent anywhere. I'd done my research. I knew exactly how much I needed to escape. She asked, "How about 3 months and you're on the hook for the cover when we do a full LP?" I said, "If you guys stay together that long." 8 months later, I drew the cover for her band's first LP. They're opening for Frozen Soul on tour right now. But I'm getting ahead of myself. During the 3 months Piper let me freeload, I started drawing cover art, tour posters, and merch designs for more bands. I made enough to pay for a 4th month, then a 5th. By then, I established enough of a reputation to get commissions from small national acts. Piper knew about my sleep problems. Fortunately, she was a night owl and would often stay up all night playing video games with her partner. If I ever left my room, she'd guide me back and tuck me in. I finally made enough to afford my own place for 1 month and moved out of Piper's. I scraped by for a couple of years until headlining acts started noticing my work. Producing art in my 4th floor apartment allowed me to use modafinil when I needed to, but most of the time I rejected it. I found my best ideas in sleepwaking states. My apartment had a balcony, and if I ever found myself out there, I would test whether I was awake or asleep by attempting to place creatures in the windows of the opposite building. Sometimes I relied on old friends. A hollow-eyed rabbit would stare back at me, or a metal man on a tall bicycle would flash behind someone's semi-open blinds. Sometimes I would go window by window until I spotted all 3 of the wailing family members. Those 3 appeared in much of my artwork too. If I couldn't make the courtyard sculptures appear in the opposite windows, it meant I was awake. I rarely used the balcony while awake, but frequently found myself out there when asleep. I never tried to conjure the tall figure. I was afraid to ask it to appear. I didn't even imagine the toothless man who almost certainly must have been dead by then. I didn't want them to take me to the warm light again. When I lived with Grandma, I'd still wanted to find out what was waiting for me inside the light. Now that my life was good, I felt afraid to let the light come close. I worried it might tempt me into it and that I wouldn't come back. After sending a rough sketch to Chelsea Grin's manager one night, I put some leftover pizza in the microwave. When I hit start, I heard my balcony door slide open behind me. I whipped around. The door was closed. I went to it anyway and slid it open to test the sound against my memory of what I'd heard. It was a perfect match. First, I only peered out. Then I stepped onto the balcony. Lights inside 5 apartments across from me flicked on. They even appeared in order: the Rabbit Head, the Bicycle Man, the Wailing Family. The light behind the Rabbit Head made its eyes glow yellow. The Bicycle Man stared down at me from 1 floor up and 2 apartments across. On the floor directly across from me, the 3 members of the Wailing Family were separated into 3 consecutive apartments. The mother on the left and the father in the middle were posed as if screaming at one another. The child in the apartment on the right faced me and appeared to be screaming at me. A deep thunk and shattering glass drew my eyes to the parking lot 3 stories below. An overhead light reflected off thousands of shards of broken glass from a tipped-over recycling bin, and beside the toppled bin, 10 eyes stared up at me. The figure raised its hands, inviting me to jump down to it. I felt an illogical confidence that it would catch me. I lifted my gaze back to the windows. All 3 family members were now watching me with stoic posture. The rabbit's yellow eyes and the giant machine nuts on top of the bicyclist's head stared too. I looked back down and saw I'd brought my right foot to the top of the rail. I quickly planted it back on the balcony. The tall figure lowered its arms. When I backed away from the rail, it darted toward my building. I lurched back to the rail and looked over in time to see the figure stretch its arms up again and leap to the first balcony. With the effortlessness of a spider, it clambered up the railing and jumped to the second balcony, all while staring straight up at me. I turned and tried to run back into my apartment. My feet moved with agonizing slowness like an avatar in a lagging video game. I clicked the lock tight right before 2 long-fingered hands wrapped around my rail. The hands dragged the 10-eyed round face up into view. And remember how before I could not recall whether it had a mouth? This appearance left no doubt. It sneered at me with a lipless slit lined with gray, needle-like teeth. It hoisted itself over the rail. My sleeping body responded slowly to my commands as I tried to run toward my bedroom. I heard a soft thud as the figure landed on my balcony. I doubted the glass door and pitiful lock would hold it at bay for long. I slogged through my bedroom and into my bathroom where my modafinil sat by the sink. I locked the bathroom door and put one of the tablets in my mouth before filling my cupped hands with water and swallowing. Modafinil takes 2 to 4 hours to fully set in, but I needed all the help I could get to wake up. The dream would not release me. I splashed cold water on my face and pinched the back of my hand with a pair of tweezers. Nothing worked. I wondered if I had not actually fallen asleep. I considered the possibility the entities from my dreams had manifested in waking reality. I heard the sliding door open. The figure didn't make another sound until it reached my bedroom door. Then it twisted the knob twice, and I woke up. The edges in my bathroom suddenly sharpened. The sound of the vent fan and running water from the sink faucet I'd apparently left on crystallized in an instant. I pinched the back of my hand with the tweezers and winced, biting my lip to keep from shouting. I listened, then opened the bathroom door and stepped into my bedroom. There, I waited, frozen, until a sudden burst of courage helped me open the bedroom door. I flipped on the light and stepped into my empty apartment. The sliding door was closed. The microwave beeped once to remind me of the food I'd left inside it. My eyes kept drawing me back to the wall next to my bedroom door. I kept sensing movement there, but saw nothing whenever I turned to look. I opened my apartment door and backed into the hallway. Then I stood there, staring at the blank wall next to my bedroom door. A quiet voice inside me screamed that the tall figure with 10 eyes was standing there. I wondered if it was the voice of my subconscious, if he could still see what I would be seeing if I stayed asleep. A door opened down the hall. The 40-something woman from 4C locked her door, then noticed me. She asked, "Ian, everything okay?" I could never remember her name. I said, "Oh, hey, everything's fine, yeah. I just got home." "Go somewhere fun?" she asked. She slipped her keys into her clutch and snapped it shut. Just dinner," I said. She asked where I went because she was trying to decide where to eat. I made something up. As our conversation circled the drain, she asked, "Are you sure you're okay? You look worried." I smiled and told her I was fine. Then I had to prove it. I stepped into my apartment, bid her goodnight, and shut the door. My apartment felt less haunted after my rushed chat with the neighbor. I stared at the wall next to my bedroom door for a long time, daring anything lurking there to come out. But if something had been there before, it was gone by then. I hurried into the bathroom to see if I'd actually taken the modafinil and found that I had. I shook my head over the empty packaging. It was almost 7 p.m. by then. In 2 hours, when the medication kicked in, it would only be 9. I probably wouldn't be able to fall asleep until at least 6 or 7 in the morning. If I'd been in my right mind, I never would have taken the tablet so late. I heard a noise and peered around the corner to see through the bedroom doorway into the apartment. All was quiet and still. I decided the noise must have come from outside. I wondered if I'd be so jumpy the whole night. Although it seemed unlikely, I decided to try falling asleep before the medication kicked in. I felt wired, but thought if I laid down and put on some white noise, I could maybe slip into sleep. I lay in bed, trying to keep my mind clear. I kept my eyes closed as I shifted into whatever position my body told me would be most comfortable. Once I settled, I focused on box breathing. In for 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hold for 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out for 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And hold for 6 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then in for 6 seconds again. 1, 2. My bedroom door creaked open. I held my breath. The apartment beyond the threshold was too dark to make anything out. I couldn't see who or what had opened the door. I found that strange since it was not nearly late enough to make the apartment pitch black yet. I glanced at the alarm clock beside my bed. It displayed 11:73. I did a double take and saw the time now displayed as 88:12. I'd obviously achieved my goal and fallen asleep, but I had failed to consider what I would do after that. To test whether I was sleepwaking or immersed in a fabricated dream world, I tried to force the light in the kitchen to turn on from afar. It remained off. I slipped out of bed to prepare for whatever happened next. Out in the dark, I heard the blinds hiss open. A faint light radiated into the apartment from the sliding door. It cast a shadow of the tall figure's praying mantis frame against the refrigerator and across the ceiling. The shadow pivoted. It started walking, shrinking as it stepped further from the light and closer to my door. I hurriedly tiptoed to my bedroom door to close it, but a long hand slid across the door from around the corner and held it open. The tall figure stepped into view and looked down at me. Its 10 black eyes all moved independent of each other. Each seemed to study a different part of me. It removed its hand from the door and stepped back, giving the impression it wasn't trying to threaten me. It raised both hands sideways in front of it, like someone holding a baby that spit up on itself. Then it closed and opened its fingers repeatedly, beckoning me to come out. I felt I had no choice but to obey. The figure made room for me to exit the bedroom, and when we stood almost toe-to-toe, it lowered one hand and used the other to point toward the balcony. It placed a cold, flat hand on my back and prodded me toward the door. I acquiesced and walked toward it. The figure reached around me and grabbed the sliding door's handle with one long hand. Then, for the first time ever, I spoke to it. I said, "I don't want to go." I turned my head to see its reaction and met one of its 10 searching eyes. I got the impression its eyes were all speaking to each other, participating in a lively debate of what to do about this stubborn human. I looked back at the light and said, "I'm happy now. It took a long time, but I'm really happy. It's not like it was before when I was a kid. I don't want to leave this." A strong hand pushed my back and slammed me into the glass door. My head thunked against it and I smelled blood in my nose. It started dripping on my shirt. Dazed, I remained still as the other hand pushed the sliding door open. Cold fingers wrapped around the back of my neck and forced me onto the balcony like a naughty dog. I hinged at the waist over the rail and grabbed it with both hands to keep myself from careening over it. I pleaded with the tall figure not to throw me over, but I was entirely at its mercy. I kept my feet planted on the balcony until the figure grabbed my shirt with its other hand and hoisted me up. Then, still holding me, it leapt over the rail. My stomach lurched as we entered free fall, plummeting toward the parking lot. The hands clutching me suddenly grew warm. A blinding light radiated from behind me. A second before we would have crashed into the pavement, my entire world went white. I awoke with a jolt in my bed. Daylight streamed through my blinds. I could hear traffic outside. I rubbed the sleep from my heavy eyes and sat up. When my sheets fell off, I noticed a brownish red stain down the front of my shirt. I reached a hand up to feel my nose. What my fingers found instead was a ratty beard. I darted to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and looked in the mirror. A man I didn't recognize stared back at me. He had thick hair and a bushy beard, both in desperate need of trimming. My shirt was indeed stained with blood from what appeared to have been a nasty nosebleed, but my nose looked perfectly fine. I examined my hands and saw that my nails had grown far too long. I lifted my shirt, searching for any scars or markings, but found nothing out of the ordinary. I ran to my sliding door, and from safely behind the glass, I tried to make the courtyard sculptures appear in the opposite windows. They refused to manifest. I checked the clock. 9:43. I pinched the back of my hand. It hurt. I suddenly realized I was horribly thirsty and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. When I walked past the microwave, I thought to open it and look inside, and found a moldy piece of pizza on a plate on the turntable. When I had the presence of mind to check the date, I learned I'd been gone for 2 weeks. No one noticed except the landlord. I owed a hefty late fee for the rent. I was never able to lucid dream again, and I also stopped sleepwaking. I still took my modafinil for about a month, but eventually tried going off it and found I didn't need it anymore. Apparently, my narcolepsy had been cured. I still have no idea what else was done to me while I was gone, or why I was chosen for whatever happened to me. All I know is I haven't seen the tall figure since. I'm not sure that means it isn't still here watching me. Maybe my ability to see it was stripped from me during my absence. I suppose in time, I might be able to forget about the tall figure and the column of light altogether. I occasionally still see sculptures in my ordinary dreams, but no more frequently than I see my parents or my grandma. They're just fixtures in my hall of memories. I hope, more than anything, that is how they remain.